After World War II, people who were born in sort of the late 40s, about less than half of those who were born into the bottom 25%, judged by income, actually stayed there over the course of the next couple decades. That means that more than half of them moved out of the bottom 25%. That's real mobility, but that was 50 years ago. We also know, though, more recently, from some polls that were conducted by the New York Times over the years, that starting in 1980 or so and going up to 2005, the share of people who thought that it was possible to use hard work and go from being poor to being rich actually rose from 60% of the population of the US to about 80%. So people had the impression that this dream of going from rags to riches was really possible. And there was a growing number of people who believed that that was true. Now, let me just take a poll of the audience here. Do you want to put your hand up if you now live in what you would consider a socioeconomic class that's higher than where you started out when you were born? Without revealing too much. I see most of the audience says yes, okay? A lot of what this talk is about today is whether this continues to be true today, whether it's going to be true for your children. Because I think that there's a lot of evidence around indicating that this mobility is starting to disappear. We've seen stagnation in real wages, that's wages adjusted for inflation, as you all know, over the last couple of decades. We've also seen that jobs today require ever more education and training, so you have to invest more in order to be able to accomplish this mobility today. And there's a lot of pressure coming from the current wave of globalization as well. We now have a lot more to do to compete with people around the world who not necessarily are competing with you right next to you, but are competing with you for jobs that could be passed abroad. So these are all things that are really hitting at social mobility in this country right now. At the same time, social mobility may be growing in a lot of other countries around the world because we see increasing democratization, we see more countries getting integrated into the global economy, so there could actually be more opportunities for people abroad to enjoy the kind of social mobility that we've had here for many decades. Now, what I want to ask today is how are all these trends going to affect us, the trends that are happening here and the trends that are happening abroad, even as we look out 10, 20, 40 years into the future. Okay, well, first let's take a step back and talk about the benefits of social mobility. You know, we know it's an idea that's fundamentally attractive to us as a principle. It's the American dream in some ways, but it's more than that. It actually has very tangible effects for us, okay? First of all, it helps our economy to grow. It gets the most production out of the highest ability people. We need turnover, right? Because there may be people who are born into privilege, but who don't have the work ethic. They don't necessarily have the talents to take full advantage of the opportunities that may come their way. We want those opportunities to go to the people who do have the work ethic, who do have the talent. We need this kind of turnover. We need this mobility so that we match the opportunities to the people who are best able to take them up. We also need motivation for people to invest in themselves, to gain that human capital, the education and training that makes them more productive in our society and helps our economy to grow. If there's no mobility, then where's the incentive to make those investments? That mobility creates that. And it's also a source of optimism, and optimism is important. We know that consumer confidence is important in this country for making the country move. We know that when people are optimistic, they're more likely to invest, they're more likely to hire workers, they're more likely to build, whether it's their own home or the home of their business. Another way in which it helps us is by being the foundation of what is really an aspirational consumer culture. And what I mean by that is the following. If you look at an ad like this for one of our biggest brands in this country, and indeed the world, it came out a few decades ago, this brand. You probably haven't seen it in a magazine recently. It really, to me, reflects what created the consumer culture in the crucible of this country a couple of centuries ago. This ad for Coca-Cola says, "Join the club around the corner, admission only 5 cents." Now look at the ad. You've got a kid in a college sweater. He's surrounded by well-dressed, attractive people, and he's just in the corner drugstore, and there's a guy outside in the window there, just an average guy, what used to be a working stiff in those days, wearing a hat, who's looking in. And you know, he can be part of that. He doesn't have to go to that college. He doesn't have to have that college sweater and those girls. But what this ad is saying is, for 5 cents, something that's accessible to everybody. You buy that Coke, you can be part of this. And that is really this aspirational consumer culture working. I'll show you another ad that reflects this too, also for Coke. Look at this gentleman. He's got his perfectly coiffed hair, he's wearing a nice jacket and tie, he's drinking a Coke right out of the bottle, the way you might on the street, or if you're on the job outside. But what is it saying? It's saying what's good enough for him is good enough for me. And that means something very, very powerful in our society. It means, hey, there's something that unites us. That guy might have started out like me, but he made it. Doesn't mean that he's changed. He's still a regular guy. And you know what? Everybody who makes it doesn't necessarily take a spot away from me in the firmament. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The people who make it are proof that going from rags to riches is possible. That's the self-perpetuating, self-confirming aspect of our consumer culture. Now, this aspirational consumer culture actually has benefits for us. I mean, it means that if you look around the world, as we try to move into this global economy, make money in this global economy, there are people who want to be like us. And they're using our aspirational consumer culture. They're moving up. They're looking at our brands and saying, those brands, those American brands, they have prestige. Those are the things that if I can associate them, I'm going to get on that same aspirational train. And it also means that they resent us less. They want to be like us. They don't necessarily want to reject us. But what has to happen, of course, is the mobility has to be there to make this true.